Great Scott.
Doc Brown exclaims as he examines the complex circuitry of the TARDIS console.
This technology is light years beyond anything I've ever seen.
The 10th Doctor, meanwhile, skeptically eyes the DeLorean's flux capacitor.
You're telling me this glorified car can actually travel through time?
As the two geniuses bicker over whose time machine is superior, Marty McFly notices a growing distortion in the air around them. Suddenly, a familiar face from the Doctor's past emerges from the temporal rift, grinning malevolently.
Oh, this is just too perfect.
The Master chuckles, holding up a device that's causing time itself to unravel.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and comment below for what you want to see next.
The TARDIS console erupts in a cacophony of alarms, startling the Doctor into action. His hands fly across the controls, desperately trying to stabilize the time machine as it spirals wildly through the vortex.
No, no, no,
He shouts, eyes widening in panic.
What's happening to you, old girl?
The time rotor pulses erratically, casting an eerie blue glow across the Doctor's face. He squints at the monitor, which displays a swirling mass of temporal energy, unlike anything he's encountered before. The TARDIS lurches violently, throwing the Doctor off balance. He grabs onto the console, knuckles white as he struggles to maintain his footing.
Come on,
He mutters, frantically adjusting dials and flipping switches. But nothing seems to work. The navigation controls remain unresponsive, leaving the TARDIS at the mercy of this strange anomaly. Sparks suddenly erupt from the console, showering the Doctor in a spray of hot embers. He yelps, stumbling backward as more systems begin to fail. The entire room shudders, tossing the Doctor to the floor. He scrambles to his feet, only to be knocked down again as the TARDIS spins out of control. Books tumble from shelves, tools clatter across the grating, and the time rotor's usual soothing hum transforms into a pained grinding noise. Through the open doors, the Doctor catches glimpses of a swirling vortex of temporal energy engulfing the TARDIS. The familiar blue of the time tunnel is now shot through with angry red streaks. Warning lights flash across every surface of the console room as more and more systems go dark.
No, don't do this!
The Doctor pleads, clinging to the railing as he makes his way back to the controls. But it's too late. The TARDIS is completely overpowered by the mysterious force pulling it off course. All the Doctor can do now is brace for impact. He grips the console tightly, eyes squeezed shut as the TARDIS hurtles towards an unknown destination. The grinding of the engines reaches a deafening crescendo. Then, with a bone-jarring crash, everything goes silent. The Doctor cautiously opens one eye, then the other. The TARDIS has landed, or crashed, more accurately. Smoke drifts lazily from the scorched console. Sparks occasionally pop from exposed wiring. But they've arrived. Somewhere. Taking a deep breath, the Doctor straightens his tie and brushes debris from his suit. He approaches the TARDIS doors with trepidation, unsure of what awaits him on the other side. His hand hovers over the handle for a moment before he musters the courage to pull it open. The door creaks as it swings inward, revealing a dimly lit room cluttered with strange machinery. The Doctor's brow furrows as he takes in the eclectic mix of technologies surrounding him. Some devices look primitive by his standards, while others seem surprisingly advanced for what appears to be a 20th century Earth laboratory. He steps out of the TARDIS, wincing slightly as his feet touch solid ground. The air smells of ozone and motor oil. Posters of obscure scientific diagrams cover the walls, and there, scrawled on a chalkboard in messy handwriting, is a date that makes the Doctor's heart skip a beat. October 26th, 1985.
Well,
He says to himself, a mix of confusion and curiosity in his voice.
this should be interesting.
A shocking discovery. The Doctor's eyes dart around the cluttered laboratory, his mind racing. A bewildering mix of past and future tech fills the room. As he examines a complex diagram on a nearby chalkboard, a chill runs down his spine.
This equation shouldn't exist here and now, mutters the Doctor.
He runs his fingers along the edge of a workbench, marveling at the strange contraptions scattered across its surface. A half-assembled circuit board sits next to a primitive attempt at a sonic screwdriver. In the corner, a bulky computer monitor flickers with advanced code. The doctor picks up a device resembling a cross between a Walkman and a tricorder.
Whoever built this has access to technology well beyond 1980s Earth.
His gaze falls upon a crumpled newspaper. The date reads October 26, 1985. A nagging sense of danger tugs at his mind. The doctor turns to the chalkboard dominating one wall. His eyes widen as he takes in the complex temporal equations.
These calculations, they're laying the groundwork for localized time travel.
Panic sets in. He races back to the TARDIS, only to find the interior dark and lifeless. The controls don't respond. The time rotor remains still.
Come on, old girl,
He pleads, patting the central column.
we need to figure out what's going on here.
The lab door bursts open. A wild-haired man in a white lab coat stands there, eyes wide with shock at the sight of the blue police box. "Great Scott!" the man exclaims. "What in the name of Sir Isaac H. Newton is going on here?" The doctor raises his hands. "I'm the doctor, and there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for this." Well, reasonable might be stretching it. More like a wildly improbable series of events involving temporal physics and a malfunctioning time machine. You wouldn't happen to have seen a flux capacitor, would you? Before the scientist can respond, footsteps pound up the stairs. A teenage boy bursts in, skidding to a stop. "Doc!" the boy shouts, eyes darting between them. "What's going on? Who's this guy?" The doctor grins despite the situation. "Excellent. Now that we're all here, perhaps we can start sorting out this temporal tangle. But first, introductions. I'm the doctor, as I mentioned. And you two are unlikely allies."
Who are you?
Doc Brown exclaims, his wild eyes darting between the doctor and the TARDIS. The doctor steps forward, hands raised in a placating gesture.
Now, I know this looks strange, but I can explain, well, sort of. It's a bit complicated, involving temporal physics and...
He trails off, noticing Doc Brown's expression shifting from shock to intense curiosity.
Temporal physics?
Doc Brown repeats, his voice rising with excitement.
You mean to tell me that blue box is some kind of time machine?
Before the doctor can respond, Marty McFly bursts into the lab, skidding to a halt as he takes in the bizarre scene.
"Doc, what's going on? Who's this guy? And why is there a phone booth in your lab?"
The doctor's brow furrows.
Phone booth, I'll have you know this is a highly sophisticated time and space machine called the TARDIS. It's complicated.
Marty's eyes widen.
Whoa, heavy. Another time machine? Doc, are you hearing this?
Doc Brown nods enthusiastically, circling the TARDIS with unbridled fascination.
Incredible. The possibilities are endless. Tell me, Doctor, what kind of flux capacitor does this machine use?
The doctor blinks, momentarily confused.
Flux capacitor, never heard of it. The TARDIS runs on Artron energy and... Oh, never mind. The point is, I've crash-landed here due to some sort of temporal anomaly, and I need your help to fix it.
As the two scientists launch into a rapid-fire exchange of theories and terminology, Marty finds himself struggling to keep up. The doctor's alien concepts clash with Doc's 1980s-based understanding of time travel, creating a whirlwind of confusion and excitement.
Hold up.
Marty interjects, sensing the conversation spiraling out of control.
Let's take this one step at a time. Doctor, you're saying you're from the future, right?
The doctor hesitates.
Well, not exactly. I'm from another universe altogether. It's all a bit wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey.
Marty furrows his brow.
Okay, lost me there. Doc, can you translate?
Doc Brown strokes his chin thoughtfully.
I believe our new friend is suggesting that the very fabric of space-time is in flux, Marty.
As the two geniuses dive back into their theoretical debate, Marty finds himself playing an unexpected role, mediator between two of the most brilliant and stubborn minds in the multiverse.
Okay, so let me get this straight.
Marty says, piecing together the fragments of their discussion.
The doctor's time machine crashed into our timeline, causing some kind of temporal earthquake? And now we need to fix it before things get worse?
The doctor grins, impressed by Marty's quick thinking.
Exactly. Well, mostly it's a bit more complicated than that, but you've got the general idea.
Doc Brown nods vigorously.
Precisely, Marty. We're dealing with a level of temporal instability that could have catastrophic consequences if left unchecked.
As the gravity of the situation sinks in, the trio exchanges worried glances. The initial excitement of their meeting gives way to a sobering realization. They're facing a crisis that threatens the very fabric of time itself.
Well then,
The doctor says, straightening his tie with determination.
it seems we have no choice but to work together. 2 time machines, 3 minds, and 1 temporal catastrophe to prevent. What do you say, gentlemen? Shall we save the universe?
Marty and Doc share a look of both excitement and trepidation. Whatever comes next, it's clear their lives will never be the same. Temporal anomalies plague Hill Valley. As the doctor, Doc Brown, and Marty step out of the lab, an eerie silence hangs over Hill Valley. The familiar streets suddenly feel off-kilter, as if reality itself has gone slightly askew. They don't have to wait long for the first signs of trouble. A group of bewildered pedestrians gathers around a horse-drawn carriage that's materialized in the middle of a busy intersection. Traffic screeches to a halt as the confused driver, dressed in full Victorian attire, tries to navigate around honking cars. Marty's jaw drops.
Doc, please tell me that's just some weird historical reenactment.
Before Doc Brown can respond, a futuristic hovering vehicle zips past them, narrowly missing a streetlight. The doctor's eyes widen.
I'm afraid it's much worse than that. The collision of our time machines has weakened the local space-time continuum. Objects and even people from different eras are bleeding through.
As if to prove his point, a group of Roman legionaries marches down the sidewalk, looking utterly perplexed by their surroundings. Panicked shouts and car alarms fill the air as more anomalies pop up across town. A World War II fighter plane roars overhead, while a herd of woolly mammoths lumbers through the town square. The doctor takes in the chaos and exclaims,
The collision of our technologies must have created a cascading effect. Each new anomaly further weakens the barriers between time periods, allowing more to slip through. If we don't stop this soon, the entire timeline could unravel.
Marty, trying to process the chaos around them, suddenly freezes.
Guys, I think we have an even bigger problem.
He points across the street, where an older version of himself is walking out of a store, oblivious to the pandemonium.
Don't let him see you.
Doc Brown shouts, pulling Marty behind a parked car.
If your future self spots you, it could create a paradox.
And in this weakened state of reality, even a small paradox could be catastrophic.
The doctor explained. They watch as future Marty narrowly avoids being trampled by a stampeding triceratops, diving into an alley for safety. Once he's out of sight, our heroes breathe a collective sigh of relief. Doc exclaimed,
We need to get back to the lab immediately. If we don't stabilize these temporal anomalies soon, Hill Valley could be torn apart by the conflicting time streams.
As they rush back towards the lab, dodging confused time travelers and extinct animals, the full weight of their situation sinks in. The once quiet town of Hill Valley has become the epicenter of a temporal disaster, with the fate of reality itself hanging in the balance. Their unlikely alliance is about to face its greatest challenge yet, racing against time to prevent total temporal collapse. Jury-rigging a solution. Picture this. The doctor, a 900-year-old alien genius, hunched over a DeLorean's hood alongside Doc Brown. 2 brilliant minds, separated by light years of technological advancement, now forced to find common ground. Can they overcome their differences before reality itself unravels? The doctor's eyes sparkle with fascination as he examines every inch of the DeLorean.
Oh, this is brilliant!
He exclaims, running his sonic screwdriver over the flux capacitor.
Absolutely ingenious. You've managed to create a localized temporal field using Earth technology. It shouldn't work, but it does.
Doc Brown beams with pride, but his expression quickly turned serious.
Thank you, Doctor, but we need to focus on combining our technologies to stop this temporal crisis. Any ideas?
The two scientists launch into a rapid-fire exchange of theories and calculations. Their different approaches to time travel clash spectacularly. The Doctor insists on using principles of quantum mechanics and temporal physics, while Doc Brown argues for a more practical, engineering-based solution.
No, no, no.
The Doctor exclaims, waving his arms.
We can't just slap a flux capacitor onto the TARDIS console and hope for the best. The dimensional transcendence alone would cause a feedback loop that could implode half the state.
Doc Brown furrows his brow, scribbling furiously on a nearby chalkboard.
But if we reverse the polarity of the neutron flow and channel it through the DeLorean's temporal displacement circuits...
As the two geniuses bicker, Marty's eyes dart between them like he's watching a high-stakes tennis match. Suddenly, an idea strikes him.
Hey guys,
He interrupts.
what if we use some 1980s tech to bridge the gap between your machines? You know, like a universal translator, but for time machines.
The Doctor and Doc Brown pause, considering Marty's suggestion. A slow grin spreads across the Doctor's face.
Marty McFly, you're brilliant. We need components that can interface with both the TARDIS's advanced systems and the DeLorean's more, shall we say, quaint technology.
To Radio Shack.
Doc Brown declares, grabbing his keys. The unlikely trio bursts into the local electronics store, startling the bored clerk behind the counter. They race through the aisles, grabbing resistors, capacitors, and circuit boards by the handful. Back in the lab, they set to work. Trial and error lead to several small explosions and setbacks. The Doctor yelps as a shower of sparks erupts from a jury-rigged circuit board. Doc Brown's hair stands even more on end after a close call with an overloaded power supply. But slowly, progress emerges from the chaos. The Doctor adapts TARDIS components to interface with the DeLorean systems. Doc Brown reconfigures the flux capacitor to accept the alien energy source. Marty, following their rapid-fire instructions, solders connections and reroutes wires with surprising skill. Hours pass in a blur of activity. Finally, the moment of truth arrives. The Doctor holds his breath as he connects the last wire between the TARDIS console and the modified flux capacitor. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happens. Then, with a familiar wheezing groan, the TARDIS console flickers to life. The time rotor begins to pulse, powered by the incredible energy of the flux capacitor. The Doctor lets out a whoop of joy, pulling Marty and Doc Brown into an impromptu group hug.
We did it!
He exclaims.
A perfect fusion of Time Lord technology and good old-fashioned American ingenuity. Oh, this is brilliant!
As the hybrid time machine hums with power, the trio exchanges excited grins. They've overcome their differences and created something extraordinary. Now, they have a fighting chance to save Hill Valley, and perhaps the entire universe, from temporal collapse. A familiar face. Before long, the trio gets hungry and heads to the Hill Valley Diner. Marty and Doc Brown treat the Doctor to the finest Hill Valley has to offer. As the Doctor, Marty, and Doc Brown exited the diner, still chuckling over their cultural misunderstandings, a chill ran down the Time Lord's spine. His laughter died in his throat, replaced by a look of dread that made his companions freeze. Across the street stood a face the Doctor had hoped never to see again. The Master, his oldest friend and deadliest enemy, looked completely at ease in 1985 Hill Valley. He wore a sharp suit, but his eyes held a familiar glint of madness.
Doctor,
Marty whispered.
who is that guy? You look like you've seen a ghost.
The Doctor's voice was low and urgent.
That man is more dangerous than you can possibly imagine. We need to get out of here now.
But it was too late. The Master had already spotted them and was crossing the street.
Well, well, well.
He called out.
Fancy meeting you here, Doctor. And with such charming local companions, no less.
Doc Brown stepped forward.
Another Time Lord? Fascinating. Perhaps you can help us resolve the temporal anomalies plaguing Hill Valley.
The Master's smile widened.
Oh, but my dear Dr. Brown, why would I want to resolve something I worked so hard to create?
Realization dawned on the Doctor.
It was you. You caused the TARDIS to crash here.
Marty looked between the two Time Lords.
Hold up. What's going on? Doc, is this guy seriously responsible for all the weird stuff happening in town?
The Master nodded.
Yes, young Marty. And I must say, the results have been even more entertaining than I anticipated.
Doc Brown's face paled.
But why? What could you possibly hope to gain?
Power, of course.
The Master replied simply. The Doctor took a protective step in front of his new friends.
Whatever you're planning, I'll stop you.
The Master's eyes glittered.
Oh, I'm counting on you to try. Help me complete my work, and I'll spare this quaint little town. Refuse, and I hope you're not too attached to Hill Valley.
Without waiting for a response, the Master disappeared into the crowd. The Doctor sprang into action.
Back to the lab now,
He ordered.
We're running out of time, and I need to explain just how much danger we're really in.
Race against time. The familiar whine of the TARDIS filled the air, but something was terribly wrong. Instead of materializing, it flickered in and out of reality like a dying light bulb. If the Doctor's time machine was failing, what hope did they have of stopping the Master's plan? Back in Doc Brown's lab, the unlikely trio worked frantically to complete their hybrid time machine. The Doctor and Doc Brown hunched over the console, their hands flying across controls as they tried to stabilize the temporal field. Marty paced nervously, keeping watch for any signs of the Master's interference. Suddenly, a potted plant on the windowsill began to wither and die, its leaves crumbling to dust in a matter of seconds.
The temporal distortions are getting worse.
The Doctor warned, his voice tight with concern.
We're running out of time.
Outside, parts of Hill Valley began to flicker in and out of existence. Buildings would vanish, only to reappear moments later, looking decades older or newer. Panicked screams echoed through the streets as confused residents tried to make sense of the chaos. The Doctor and Doc Brown's collaboration quickly devolved into an argument.
We need to focus on containing the anomalies.
Doc Brown insisted, gesturing wildly at his equations.
If we can create a temporal barrier around Hill Valley, we might be able to stop the spread.
No.
The Doctor countered, running his hands through his hair in frustration.
That's just putting a bandage on a bullet wound. We need to track down the source of the distortions and neutralize it at its origin point.
As they bickered, Marty noticed something strange happening to his hand. It was becoming transparent, fading in and out of view like a bad special effect.
Guys?
He called out, his voice shaking.
I think we have a problem.
The Doctor spun around, his eyes widening in horror.
Marty, your parents! The timeline where they first met must be unraveling. Quick, think about your most vivid memory of them together. Focus on it with everything you've got.
Marty clenched his eyes shut, concentrating on the image of his parents dancing at the enchantment under the sea dance. Slowly, his hand began to solidify again. He let out a shaky breath.
That was too close.
Just then, an angry mob appeared outside the lab, led by Mr. Strickland.
There they are,
He shouted, pointing accusingly.
the troublemakers responsible for all this chaos.
The Master's influence was growing, turning the townspeople against our heroes. As the situation spiraled out of control, Marty's quick thinking saved the day. He spotted the Doctor about to step through a temporal rift, not realizing it would create a paradox. Without hesitation, Marty tackled the Time Lord, pushing him out of harm's way just as the rift collapsed. The Doctor looked at Marty with newfound respect.
Quick thinking, Marty. You just saved me from a nasty temporal feedback loop.
Their moment of triumph was short-lived, however. A loud hum filled the lab as the hybrid time machine sparked to life. The temporal distortions began to stabilize, but a new problem emerged. The device required constant monitoring to maintain the delicate balance.
Someone needs to stay behind.
Doc Brown said grimly, voicing what they all realized.
To keep the machine running and protect Hill Valley from further anomalies.
The three friends exchanged heavy looks, knowing that a difficult decision lay ahead. The fate of Hill Valley, and perhaps the entire timeline, now rested in their hands. Sacrifice and heroism. Time itself seemed to hold its breath as the three friends faced their greatest challenge yet. With parts of Hill Valley already fading from existence, they knew that inaction wasn't an option, but the price of saving their world might be higher than any of them were prepared to pay. Doc Brown stepped forward, his wild hair even more disheveled than usual.
I'll do it,
He declared, his voice filled with determination.
I've lived a full life, and if staying behind means protecting the future for Marty and everyone else, then so be it.
The doctor shook his head vehemently.
No, it has to be me. This whole mess started because of my TARDIS malfunctioning. I can't ask you to sacrifice everything for my mistake.
As the two scientists argued, Marty's mind raced. He couldn't bear the thought of losing either of his friends.
Wait!
He shouted, causing both men to turn and look at him.
There's gotta be another way. What if we take turns manning the controls? We could rotate shifts, keeping the machine running without anyone having to stay behind permanently.
The doctor's eyes lit up for a moment, but then his face fell.
It's a clever idea, Marty, but the temporal instability is too great. Even a few minutes without someone at the controls could cause catastrophic damage to the timeline.
Just as the argument was reaching a fever pitch, a slow clap echoed through the lab. The master stepped out of the shadows, a cruel smile playing on his lips.
Oh, this is just delicious.
He purred.
The great doctor, ready to sacrifice himself for a backwater town in an insignificant time period.
The Time Lord's presence sent a chill through the room. He sauntered closer, his eyes gleaming with malice.
But what if I told you there was another way? A way to save Hill Valley without any of you having to play the hero?
Doc Brown couldn't hide his curiosity.
What are you proposing?
The master's smile widened.
It's simple, really. Allow me to harness the power of our combined time machines. I can create a temporal bubble around Hill Valley, preserving it while the rest of reality reshapes itself according to my will.
The doctor's eyes narrowed.
And what's the catch? There's always a catch with you.
Oh, nothing too terrible.
The master replied with a wave of his hand.
Just your TARDIS, and perhaps a few decades of servitude from our young friend Marty here. A small price to pay for saving an entire town. Wouldn't you agree?
As the trio considered the master's offer, the lab around them began to flicker and fade. Portions of the walls disappeared, revealing glimpses of other time periods beyond. The temporal distortions were growing stronger by the second. Marty looked between his friends, desperation clear in his eyes.
We can't trust him, right? There's gotta be another way.
The doctor's face was grim as he made his decision.
You're right, Marty. We can't trust him. Which is why I have to do this myself.
Before anyone could stop him, the Time Lord sprinted towards the hybrid time machine.
Doctor, no!
Marty shouted, but it was too late. The doctor's hands flew across the controls, initiating a sequence that would seal him inside a temporal bubble with the machine.
I'm sorry,
the doctor said, his voice filled with genuine regret.
but this is the only way to ensure the safety of Hill Valley and the entire timeline. Take care of each other and never stop being brilliant.
With a final, sad smile, the doctor activated the device. A blinding light engulfed him and the machine, leaving Marty, Doc Brown, and even the master staring in stunned silence at the empty space where their friend had stood just moments before. Temporal self-splitting. As the light faded, a familiar voice cut through the silence.
Well, that was a bit dramatic, wasn't it?
The doctor stepped out from behind a nearby console, grinning widely. But how could he be here when they'd just watched him disappear? Marty and Doc Brown stared in disbelief, their mouths hanging open. The master's smug expression turned to one of shock and then anger.
Impossible,
He sputtered.
We saw you sacrifice yourself.
The doctor straightened his tie, looking quite pleased with himself.
Ah, but that's the beauty of temporal mechanics. You saw one version of me make that sacrifice, yes, but time isn't as linear as you might think.
He began pacing the room, his hands gesticulating wildly as he explained.
You see, I split myself across multiple temporal points. The me you saw disappear? He's still there, maintaining the stability of Hill Valley's timeline, but I also created other versions of myself, including this one right here. Doc Brown's eyes lit up with understanding.
Incredible. You've essentially created temporal copies of yourself, each existing at a different point in the timeline?
The doctor nodded enthusiastically.
Exactly, it's a bit like, oh, what's a good 1980s reference? It's like recording multiple tracks on a cassette tape. Each version of me is playing a different part in this temporal symphony.
Marty shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around the concept.
But how did you know this would work? Couldn't it have, I don't know, ripped you apart or something?
The doctor's expression turned serious for a moment.
Oh, it was risky, no doubt about that. But I've spent centuries studying the intricacies of time. I knew that if I could synchronize my biodata across multiple points in the timeline, I could essentially be in more than one place at once.
The master, recovering from his initial shock, sneered at the doctor.
Always the clever one, aren't you? But you've only delayed the inevitable. My plan is still in motion, and you can't be everywhere at once.
Can't I?
The doctor replied, with a mischievous grin.
You'd be surprised at what I can do when the fate of an entire town is at stake.
As if on cue, another version of the doctor appeared in the doorway.
Right then, shall we get to work on stabilizing those temporal anomalies?
He turned to Marty and Doc Brown.
Don't worry, I'll explain everything as we go along.
The original doctor faced the master, his expression hardening.
As for you, I think it's time we had a proper chat about your plans for Hill Valley.
With multiple versions of the doctor now in play, the race to save Hill Valley took on a new dimension. One doctor worked tirelessly with Marty and Doc Brown, using their combined knowledge to reinforce the temporal barriers around the town. Another version confronted the master, engaging in a battle of wits and wills that spanned across time itself. As the temporal storm raged around them, Hill Valley hung in the balance. But with the doctor's ingenious, self-splitting gambit, hope began to flicker once more. The fate of the town, and perhaps the entire timeline, now rested in the hands of a Time Lord who refused to be bound by the linear constraints of time itself. Restoration and farewell. A blinding flash engulfed Hill Valley, and as it faded, an eerie calm settled over the streets. The doctor, Marty, and Doc Brown stood in stunned silence, their eyes adjusting to the sudden normalcy. Gone were the dinosaurs and futuristic hovercars. Hill Valley looked just as it had before their wild adventure began.
The timelines have realigned.
Doc Brown exclaimed, his wild hair still crackling with residual temporal energy. The doctor's face grew serious as he started counting heads.
Everyone all right? No missing limbs or extra appendages?
Marty patted himself down, exhaling sharply.
I'm good, Doc. But what about the rest of the town?
They ventured out onto the streets, marveling at the oblivious residents going about their day. As they made their way back to Doc Brown's lab, Marty couldn't contain his excitement any longer.
So, Doctor, can we finally see inside your time machine?
The Time Lord grinned, pushing open the TARDIS doors with a flourish.
Gentlemen, welcome aboard!
Marty and Doc Brown's jaws dropped as they stepped inside. The console room stretched out before them, far larger than the exterior suggested. As Doc Brown examined the console with childlike wonder, the doctor set about making final repairs.
Well, I suppose this is goodbye,
the doctor said softly, his work complete.
I can't thank you both enough for your help. You've shown me that human ingenuity is a force to be reckoned with, even in the face of impossible odds.
Marty felt a lump forming in his throat.
Do you really have to go?
The doctor smiled sadly.
I'm afraid so, Marty, but don't worry, I have a feeling your adventures are far from over.
They exchanged bittersweet goodbyes, along with promises to keep their incredible journey a secret. As the doctor prepared to depart, he turned to his new friends one last time.
Remember, the future isn't written, it's whatever you make it, so make it a good one. Doc looked at the doctor and said, I'm going to have to write that one down.
With a familiar wheezing groan, the TARDIS began to dematerialize. Marty and Doc Brown watched in awe as the blue box faded from view, leaving them alone with the weight of their incredible secret. As the last echoes of the TARDIS faded away, Marty turned to Doc Brown.
So what do we do now?
The scientist's eyes twinkled with renewed purpose.
Now, Marty, we get back to work. After all, we've got our own time machine to perfect.
Echoes across time. As Marty and Doc Brown walked through Hill Valley, subtle changes caught their eye. The clock tower now ticked steadily, no longer frozen at 10:04. A new mural on the library wall depicted scenes from the town's history, including an oddly familiar blue box. These small details served as quiet reminders of their incredible journey. Galaxies away, the Doctor adjusted controls on the TARDIS console, his mind briefly drifting to the resourceful humans who had aided him in saving reality. But his reminiscing was cut short as the TARDIS scanner flickered to life. For a split second, a familiar face appeared, the Master's cruel smile. The Doctor's hearts raced. Their temporal battle, it seemed, was far from over. Thanks for watching, and make sure to make a comment on what you want to see next.